Hey everyone, welcome to Meet the Moment, a podcast designed to uncover and discuss the ways to process the world and our shared experiences. I'm Hannah Drain Taylor, co-founder of Delta Awesome.
And I'm Dr. Claire Chase. I'm the founder of Resilience by Design Consulting. Welcome to Meet the Moment. Hello. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's really the easiest way to make a podcast. First of all, it's free. Second, there are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. And Anchor distributes your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many other places where podcasts are heard. You can also make money with no minimum listenership. It's really everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. You can download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Hey everybody, Hannah here. For this show, we spoke with Darrie Matthew Burrage. Claire and I met Darrie at different points during graduate school, and I quickly gravitated toward his energy and enthusiasm for allowing people to show up exactly as themselves, primarily because, without a doubt, he was fully and authentically himself in every moment we were speaking. It was something I could feel. This conversation is one that could have gone on for hours, and I really hope you enjoy it as much as we did.
Darrie Matthew Burrage here. Grew up K-12 in Southern California, then moved out to Colorado. That's where I did like my higher ed and like my first dipping my toes into the professional waters, where I got my first job and whatnot. But now, as of October, I am now located in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I guess the little snippet of my backstory is that the testimony of my professional and personal experiences that I have been someone who's all about being part of facilitating, leading, whatever conversations that are geared toward moving the needle in people's lives. And so whether that's been me as a university instructor, me as a facilitator of community issues or a facilitator of activism theater, but as of recently, moving the needle in people's lives, at least conversations that do that, is me now currently being a consultant with an organization called Integrated Work, where we work with folks who are about making a positive difference in the lives of others. And me as a consultant is just, my role is just to amplify that impact that they're already trying to make. So I'm kind of like the icing on the cake guy, the cherry on top, in terms of engaging in pro-social work, pro-social as in like for the benefit of others. So that's me, Darrie Matthew B.
Darrie, I absolutely love that intro. My first memory of you is during welcome weekend at CU Boulder. It was when all the graduate students that had been invited, to participate in the program got to come. And I walked into the office and you were there and you just like lit up. You were so excited to see new students and welcomed everybody so generously. So this, making a positive difference and having conversations for positive impact, none of that is surprising to me. It just sounds like the perfect thread from 6 or 7 years ago to now.
Oh my gosh. 6 or 7 years ago. Yeah, I guess time does that. But well, I'm glad that I don't come as a surprise to you. Which is to say, is that like um, I'm very much so letting people know what I'm about. Not in this largely flamboyant in your face kind of way, but like I com- I'm of the philosophy of that. Well, one, people should know what matters to you by what's in your calendar. Like I should be able to look at your calendar,
Mm,
and that's gonna tell me, that's gonna be a reflection of what matters to you. You know, like if your partner matters to you, I should see date night in there. If your faith matters to you, I should see like church or synagogue time. Bible study. If work matters to you, I should see the meetings in there. Or whatever. So like so your calendar lets you know what lets people know, as well as yourself know what you're about, as well as your clothing. You could, I mean, this is a podcast, you can't really see me, but for those who are listening, shout outs to you. But like I'm wearing a hoodie that says God is dope, so like, so I'm glad that I don't come as a surprise to you. I like to be like unsurprising, but yet have a little mystique going on.
Well, and I think that you are, I mean, from first meeting you, your passion shines through. And I think you're right. Like what's in your calendar tells people what's important to you. But I think that you welcome other people to also share those things that they're passionate about by being 100% you in these interactions. You're also kind of opening that up for other people to really come as themselves. And I've
Oh
always really
yes.
appreciated that about you, that I could just be Claire and joke around. I didn't have to be whatever I was pretending to be at the time.
Oh yeah, posturing is a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Um,
but I for real want the 100% real. When I'm interacting with people. So like when I facilitate, that's actually one of the things I tell people is from off top. When I'm setting like the ground rules for the occasion, is that like I'm all about the real. So I give it because I like demand it in return, not forcefully, of course, but like I try to model a particular behavior that it's okay for us to like really link up as humans here, who have aspirations, fears, anxieties, goals, dreams, histories, insecurities, setbacks, shortcomings, transitions, talking about that, transformations, evolutions, like we feel things, and think about things. And so I just want people to know that like it you're it's okay to be you, you know. And actually, I haven't thought about this song in a long time, but Robin Thicke has I don't know how controversial he is as a figure nowadays, but Robin Thicke has a song, beautiful song called "I Don't Know How It Feels to Be You," which is like a phenomenological kind of approach of relationship. It's like, yo, tell me what it's like to be in your skin. And if you want to know that, you gotta make people feel comfortable to share that. So share that to them. And so I try to be vulnerable, try to give people the real, just so folks will give me a bit of that flavor in return.
you mentioned that you help people move the needle in their lives and the various different ways you've done that. And I'm curious, when's your first memory of when you've realized that you've moved the needle in your own life?
Uh, uh,
that is solid.
well, I mean, first are important. You tend to remember first, right? Your first blank. And I mean, you could say the earliest transition is when I first have realized that, first realized my sexuality, which is, like my first crush that I ever had. I still remember her name even, so like there's these first that mark transition, right? But I think one of the more robust transitions that I had was a faith-based transition. Not necessarily transitioning faiths per se, but realizing I had faith. So it was in high school. I believe, golly, I believe it was sophomore year of high school, where I had learned very simply, I guess, that being Christian can be cool. Because Christian at that time, and even now, I mean, let's be real, even now, there's still this flavor that Christian equals stuffy, judgmental, black and white, um, just boring. And a bunch of like have tos, like you're shrouded in what you should be doing, should not, and can't and cannot, and or whatever, can and cannot. And so there was an individual who I met named Darrell Walton Smith. We were in the same classes, we both played sports and whatnot. And he was very transparent and boisterous in the most beautiful way about his faith. And he was also like the man. Like everybody knew Darrell. He was funny, charismatic. He was smart. He was like in the AP in honors classes with me. Top athlete. He loved people. He was loved. He was adored. And it's like, whoa, you could be this person and be Christian. He just completely like flipped the script, disrupted my whole idea of what it means to live a life of faith. And so when I linked up with him, I started to then go to the church that he went to. And the youth pastor of that church was also my coach, my high school football coach, one of them. And Coach Martin, Coach Donald Martin, was also the man. Like students loved Coach Martin. And so it's like, wow, you could be, because you know, like when you watch movies and stuff like that or TV shows, the popular person or whatever, they never describe this person as like someone who believes in higher power, or more importantly, believes in God. And it's like, wow, there are people who are like that who are also believers, you know. And so when I hitched my wagon to these individuals is where I started to really transition and began my spiritual life. Because I mean, spirituality is part of all of our the pie slices that make us a holistic person. Some of us are more tapped into that slice, some of us are not. And so in high school, when I became tapped into that slice of my personality pie, if you will, or my personhood pie, rather, I became more enlarged as an individual, because that's when I began to discover more of myself holistically, rather than just like these segmented slices of my personhood pie. So yeah, that was probably like the first big one, life changing.
It makes me think, you know, in that time in your life, and you know, it's such a formative time in people's lives. And I'm curious, what did you learn about yourself as, you know, maybe even as you reflect now? What were you recognizing in yourself during that time of just recognizing that these men were men of faith, and they had some sort of like magnetism to them, that you realized you could, I don't know if it's have like a slice of that pie too, or what was it for you that like helps you see this as like a really transformational time?
So part of the sense making of the transition between being this like, I don't know, I don't really think about God or whatever, to being this more devout, acclaimed Christian, is that you just gotta. So I guess I'll put it to you like this: the insight to extrapolate is this: be careful what you're chasing. And here's what I mean by that: am I chasing or pursuing the faith or the person? Am I seeking to become a Christian or seeking to become Darrell or Coach Martin? And sometimes sometimes it's tough to discern what you are transforming into or who you are becoming. And I got in trouble with that actually another time later in my life in deciding what my post college experience was going to look like. Because, I mean, I guess I have part of my testimony is also being someone who's very impressionable. Because when I was deciding what I wanted to do after my bachelor's, I had a mentor, Dr. Martin Carcassonne at Colorado State University. And he's the one who mentored me, trained me to be a facilitator. He's the one that kind of started me on my line of really caring about or seeing the power of conversation, how conversation can be life-changing and move the needle in people's lives. He was the one who started that for me. And so I was like, subconsciously, I was like, you know what? Not only do I want to do what Martine does, I also want to be Martine. So in order to be Martine, I need to go to grad school and be a professor like he did, which had brought me to you, Claire, which then, a couple years had brought me to you, Hannah. And so like there were benefits to wanting to become Martine. But when you pursue an aspiration that is a person and not so much a something intangible, like just like more of a passion or a goal, there could be some heartbreaks there, because what you do is you realize you confront oh my goodness, I can't say the word, authenticity. There you go. Inauthenticity.
There you go.
I messed it up the last time. Being inauthentic. Gosh darn it. And so, it's because you kind of lose yourself in the process. Because it's like, you know what? I only said that, did that, went there because that's what Darrell says, does, goes, wherever. Not like because I wanted myself to do that. And so like, you gotta be careful when you're seeking to transition or evolve. Like, you don't want to do so in a way that removes who you are. Granted, you as a person can always excel in transition and become better, but you gotta be careful. You gotta be really spot on in identifying what is the morally excellent virtue or ideal or aspiration that you are pursuing, not so much the person. I understand that sometimes a person can be the embodiment or harbor the ideal you have for yourself, but you got to separate the person from the pursuit a little bit. And that's
I think that there's
please can go.
There's a lot to what you're saying here. And some of this in our last conversation with Seren, we started to dig into this a little bit in terms of finding your version of authenticity and your version of your sense of self through transformation. And something I noticed about myself really early on is that I have a tendency to mimic other people. So I used to dance, I was in theater, I'm super into novels and fiction, and I've learned so much about myself and the world through these artistic, creative pursuits. And growing up, so moving into my 20s, I maintained that mimicry. I tried on different identities by hearing how somebody said something and then leaving that situation and saying it in another room. How did that feel, right? And I don't ever think it was a conscious decision to mimic, use it, test it, and then either keep it or shed it. But that process was really helpful for, and continues to be helpful for learning and leaning into my own authenticity. But you're right, we have to be really careful about using those types of tools and not being able to separate, am I going after the faith or am I going after the person? Am I going after what their life looks like and what I think I want my life to be? Because we often forget that other person's already taken. We have to be ourselves in so many ways, which leads me to my next thing of like gravitating away from like taking on different things that I like and trying them on for size, and more in starting to see myself and my humanity in other people, seeing myself in all beings for that matter, right? This is something that comes from the Bhakti yoga tradition. I just finished yoga teacher training, so my head's still
congrats.
there.
Congratulations, Hannah.
Pretty rad. Sign up for one of my classes soon. Nonetheless, it's about like seeing the whole universe as your family and seeing yourself in everyone, and you can still stand in your own authenticity and see yourself in all of these other beings. And how beautiful is that?
Hannah, you're talking about something very, very deep there, right? The first thing is this, going back to what you were saying earlier, is that, you're part of your authentic self is also accepting somebody who's a mentor of mine, Trent Norman of the Affinity Arts Consulting. He says to me all the time that you are a combination or a compilation or aggregate of all your experiences. And your experiences aren't just moments, but they're also people. Heck, there's that colloquial kind of phrase that says that, oh, you are a combination of the 5 people with whom you closely associate. Or your top 5 friends. You are an aggregate of those individuals. And so like, we also have to accept that that you're not going to be who you are. Your authenticity won't be completely divorced of others. Others live in you as well as you in them, right? Which is the second point that's also deep that you're getting at, Hannah, is that like, I think it's one of the most humbling, most powerful things to understand about what it is to be human in relation to others, is that we're not as different as we think. What is in me is also in you, and what's in you is also in me. The difference, though, is that what becomes acted out, what becomes a behavior versus what's internal. So, like, for example, let's say Sister Claire and I, we both have the thought of stealing a loaf of bread because we both hungry. So we both had the experience of being hungry, and we both had the sensation of hunger, and it both occurs to us to steal a loaf of bread. But Claire is the one who actually decides to steal the loaf of bread. And she gets arrested, booked and whatnot, and she becomes a noted thief. She becomes a thief, I am not. But what makes us different? The decision to steal the loaf of bread, not the fact that we both had the same thought. That's what really separates a lot of us, is the decisions, the actions that come from that are subsequent to the thought we have. What ties us a lot together as humans are the thoughts and the feelings that we have, which is why empathy is so powerful, right? Because that means you don't have to have the same experience of committing that decision or that action. because you probably know what the thought or the feeling that fuels that action feels like. Like that's how empathy works, that we can like relate to the emotion or the thought, not necessarily the action. And so how this ties back to transformation is that we have to, careful sounds like some bad could happen. Well, I guess
Yeah, we're not walking on eggshells.
Yeah, it's just I think a lighter form of what we're talking about is like it's just being intentional, and as well as engage in a concerted sense-making process of the experiences that you're having, ideally in real time as opposed to into retrospect. Just so you could be conscious of what are you consuming, what are the media and the messages that you're consuming, as well as with whom or with what are you associating yourself with. You know, it could be a person, it could be an object, an item, it could be an idea even. Because those things will somewhat can shape your trajectory, your transformation.
I feel like what I've heard you both say too is so interesting because I think that what you're saying is that what we see in others is a reflection of ourselves. And I think for so long that I've thought of it as what can I learn from this person? What just from the work that I do, like what can I learn about their experience in the world? But there's been a shift recently in how I've been thinking about this that I think aligns with what you're saying. Sometimes what's also valuable is what can I learn about myself from my reaction to whatever happens, whatever happens between this relationship. And I think that that's actually been slightly, well, it's very informative, but it's also kind of painful sometimes. And
oh my gosh, yes.
And it's actually helped me just deal with it, actually. So even if it's painful, I've actually been able to transform my relationship with that person without having any desire to change them. Because it's a recognition I can't change them, but I can transform or change this feeling into something that is now forgiveness of myself, um, or just recognition of what I really want, in a friendship, in business, and like all these different sectors of my life.
Oh my gosh, Claire. Ooh. So check this out. Friend of mine, Chrissy Schaefer, she told me this. She gave me this quote once. I don't know. I don't think it's hers, although she could have put her own flavor on it. She said, "No longer do we seek to like understand why we are offended at something. More so, we seek to utterly destroy the thing that which offended us."
Yes.
And so you can link that destruction, that destroying, as in like you can link it to cancel culture. You can link it to like uh, whatever, a dismantling of someone completely, totally, utterly, right? If you want to know, I think it's a more powerful exercise to think about, why am I reacting to this thing this way? Why did I say that in reaction? Why am I feeling that? Why am I sweating when Hannah says that? I think that's the thing that ought to come first, right? And I think a lot nowadays, we just bypass the whole sense making process, the whole reflection process. And we just become so fixated on going back to the quote, we just become so fixated on the thing that which offended us that, you know what, I want to destroy that thing, rather than try to do like something that's a little deeper, which is like, how am I relating to this thing, to that statement, to that event, to that whatever? And gosh, I do think that we're lacking in intellectual and emotional exercising, because we're not really taught to do so.
We're not given the tools, you're right, to figure out why. to dive deeper, to like sort through the muck of our own feelings, because I think so often we seek to get out of our feelings. Feelings are uncomfortable. They cause a physiological reaction in our body, in our gut. There's an elephant sitting on our chest. Our palms get sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy. To quote the one and only Eminem. Right?
That's
Feelings
right.
are uncomfortable. And it's so easy to point externally to those things. It's so much easier to do that than it is to sit down and figure out why. And I actually have my journal out. That's why I ran into the back to get it. For those of you who I know can't see me, that is what I did while on camera. I was reading Cast from Isabel Wilkerson, and I recently finished. And towards the end of the book, she says, she makes the distinction between empathy and radical empathy. And radical empathy, I know, it's so good. Radical empathy, I quote, means putting in the work to educate oneself and listen with a humble heart to understand others' experience from their perspective, not as we imagine we would feel. It is not about you and what you think you would do in a situation you have never been in and perhaps never will. It is a kindred connection from a place of deep knowing that opens your spirit to the pain of another as they experience it. End quote. And I think if we pair that with what you were both just saying about sense making, we have an opportunity to engage in the transformative process so that maybe we get out on the other side with a bit more authenticity, with a bit more love.
And I would venture to say, I think that that's the only way we can actually lead to action, to lead to whether it's internal transformation, whether it's like solving these huge, enormous problems that we just keep circling around. And I am obviously very biased because my work is resilience thinking, but that you have to have radical empathy in order to get there. You have to recognize yourself, but then you also have to recognize, you have to recognize the other person, excuse me. And that's the radical empathy. But then it's also the turning it inward to say, what does this also say about myself? And then you have to be willing to do something else, which is to actually move, to actually take a step forward. But we always stop at this like learning, and we have to go to that next thing. We have to actually figure out how we can develop whatever it is that we're working on. And I think it's in our personal relationships. I think it's in our professional ones. I think it's in our communities, because we can't just stop at learning.
It's true, because I mean we're no better than a reptile if we can't, if all we're doing is just reacting, to things, stimuli, and that's it, right? But as I was articulating earlier about the pie of your personhood, when you think of yourself racially, sexually, spiritually, financially, all the different pieces that make you who you are. But it's not, a lot of times when we think about that pie, we think about it two-dimensionally, right? What would I fill in the blank space of each slice of the pie? We got to begin to think of our pie three-dimensionally with layers. Like maybe it'll be more helpful to think of it not so much a pie, but versus a cake. A cake implies that there are layers, right? Whereas a pie, I think people think of it as just like one layer and that's it. And so I think the I don't know if you want to call it your character cake, I don't know. But it's your cake of layers, and thinking about the depth to each of those things. So an example that I used to tell people about dating actually is that, okay, if you find yourself getting bored with your partner, you first ask yourself, did you expose your partner to all aspects of your pie. If you left out, economically, why is that? And so you can engage in an exercise of why hasn't this part been explored just yet with that person, right? But even if you got through all those pieces of the pie, of your pie that make you who you are, you could go deeper, deeper. And like an example would be like Hannah knows that I am Black. She knows, she is acquainted with that piece of my pie. But turning that pie into a cake, have I watched Black films with Hannah? Have I gone to a Juneteenth celebration with Hannah? Has Hannah met the other Black people that are important in my life? You know, like there are I think we stop at knowing people like, oh, I know that Darrie is Black, no, Claire is white, Hannah's a woman. You know, like we stop at the superficial, but there's so much more to discover about others as well as ourselves if we go deeper, turn that pie into a cake, I guess.
That's such a great analogy. Yeah, I mean, that was amazing. And I want to bring it back to you and your experience and your lived experience of this. It sounds like that is a huge shift going from this pie idea to a cake idea. And when did it click for you? Um, was there a moment, maybe in the last couple of years, where you just fully experienced this transformation for yourself?
Sure.
And
Oh,
when?
when? Oh, gosh.
Take us there,
When?
Darrie.
I mean, has it ever stopped? It's like the win is now and it's ever present. But I guess here's when you know that you are transitioning or transforming, or you have transformed. One, it's like even working with an organization. An organization, you could tell what matters, what it's about by its policies, its programs, its people, and its paper trail. So just as those things apply to an organization, they also apply to you as a person. So here's what I mean. So you are transitioning or transforming, or you have just undergone one if one, your policies change. What you identify as being important to you has changed. Your values, the things that you stand on, how you describe yourself, as well as, and an example of that from me in my life is that, golly, from a romantic standpoint, I realized that like I can't be with you if you're not about making pro-social moves out here in this life. Like if you just so one of my favorite quotes is from Kuz Posner's. I think it's from the Leadership Challenge. No, it's called a Leader's Legacy, and it says, "In this life, are you here to do something, or just for something to do?" And I think that like many folks, many of us are out here just for looking for something to do. Whereas like I didn't realize in my come up and as I've been transitioning to the man I am today is I'm about connecting with people who are here to do something. And that's one of my policies. Like we're not gonna go so far romantically if you're not trying to do something. If you are just here for something to do, if you're just here in this life for something to do, your policies change. Also, your personnel changes, meaning like the folks with whom you hitch your wagon, like the people who you associate when you are in pursuant of something. Sometimes you kind of leave people behind, and that's a little bit of a heartbreak. So, for example, when in high school, when I was really transforming into this Christian, which Darrell and a few others were attached to, as I was spending more time with them, I was spending less time with my other friends. And that's hard and sad because I also look back on that thinking like, damn, I could have did both. I could have kicked it with both. And so sometimes you gotta, one of my favorite artists is J. Cole, and he has this lyric that says, "Gotta ask myself what mean the world to me." And so sometimes we talk about transformation, Hannah, Claire, like it's this, I mean, it's always deeply meaningful, but like it's this sexy venture. But nah, it can be really tough that you are potentially saying, I don't want to say goodbye, but you're potentially saying see you later to people, to places, to perspectives, to the person that you once were. So there's a little bit of a grieving there. And actually, you can also say transformation is, in some ways, is a process of grief, dealing with grief.
Yeah,
You know.
that's exactly where my head was starting to go, was that there is an element of grief and of moving forward almost on faith alone. Faith in yourself, faith in who you want to be, faith in the higher power that you are calling to or looking to absorb to help you move through this. And you're right. I think that it's easy to assume that you just become this person, like all of a sudden you're a beautiful butterfly. But that to get there, it was really uncomfortable. And I think too often we assume that people just became something and don't give enough credit to what it took to get there. And that's maybe that's part of the pie or the cake, right? What did it take for me to become this person that you see out here? What are the layers of that cake?
But with a cake, you get to eat all of the layers at the same time. I mean, you can take the slice through. And I think what you were saying earlier too, is that, looking back, you feel like you could have had your other friends and the friends that you're moving towards that were supporting your Christianity or your faith. And I wonder if, friendship is hard. It's difficult to kind of parse out because these are people and these are relationships. And oftentimes, like, we can say, like, what are you clinging to that's holding you back from that thing that you should be transforming into, that butterfly? You can't be both a caterpillar and a butterfly. But with relationships, it's trickier, it's muddier, because of the history, because of the layers, because like what Hannah was saying, like that each relationship transforms you. It helps you become the person you are today. And let's get into the muddy waters. What about those relationships? Like, that's really difficult. Maybe those relationships transform. Maybe they're not the same as they were, but you don't have to necessarily say goodbye completely.
I think that I like to think that I could have did both, because I actually that's part of my philosophy. I live a very both life. I always seek to how both can be accomplished. Actually, I'm reading this book called Parents Who Lead, which you could say it's a book about both, because it's about how can you pursue a life of parenthood that you would like to have while also pursuing the career aspirations that you would like to have. And so, like, it's a book of both, so like that's my part of my philosophy. But there's also, what's also real about life is that things can hold you back. There's this I mean, it's almost a colloquialism now, but like there's this famous story in the Bible about this woman. She was fleeing from her city that was being destroyed, and she looked back and she turned into a pillar of salt. Like, and so there's this idea that, like, looking back can be what causes you to stumble. And so not necessarily looking back as like reflection, which we all three of us promote, definitely is a looking back, but it's a purposeful looking back. And so it's an intentional looking back to propel yourself forward, not looking back for just looking back's sake. Going back to how we were just talking about the butterfly. Imagine being a caterpillar and you go into your cocoon not knowing what you're going to come out like. The thing about transformation is you're flirting with the unknown. You are becoming a person of yourself that you had not seen before. How do you know you have not seen it? Because you haven't been that person ever before. The unknown or uncertainty can be anxiety inducing for some people, right? Or it could be super, super exciting. How, Hannah, you were talking about hope is stepping out, not knowing who you will become and who will be there. But once again, you got to ask yourself what mean the world to you. Like if stepping out, not knowing if that branch, the end of that branch, will be strong enough to support you, or if you're just going to fall, stepping out on the edge of that branch, you have to be comfortable with the level of uncertainty because you haven't seen yourself. You don't know what you're going to look like or feel or think or whatnot when you engage in transformation. But there's only one way to know is if you accept the transformation that's ahead of you, that's dawning in your life. It's like birth pains.
There seems like such a clear parallel between what you're talking about and faith. Like having faith in the unseen, the unknown. And it reminds me of this painting. There's a picture of Noah, and it's a paint by number, and he's just looking up, and there's just numbers. It's been sticking out to me because that faith of whatever may be, like Noah is building this ark, and the rain isn't there yet. He doesn't know why he's doing it. And he is saying goodbye to what he knows, to this life, the ground, the people, and yet he has blind faith that he's building something that will save him and save animals and people he loves. And I think that is, in so many ways, it's just like the faith that we have in ourselves and transforming, the faith that we have in something much larger than ourselves, be it God or whatever you believe. But it seems so clear that hope is huge, that trust is huge, that letting go is also really huge.
And actually, check this out. Some theological speculation suggests that it had not even rained before. Like there was no idea of what rain even was prior to the flood. Like think about that. You were told something is coming that you have no concept of really, but you're supposed to build a boat. And so letting go, golly, what's that person that people keep referencing? Something Kondo. What's this woman?
Marie Kondo.
Marie Kondo. I'm hearing this name everywhere, but
yeah.
I don't have no idea what this person looks like. I haven't watched or whatever, but from what I understand, she's trying to train people how to at least entertain how letting go could be the gaining of so much more. That is the story of transformation. It's the letting go to gain so much more. But let's be clear. Some people have not made such a successful, sexy transition into this betterment. No, you can transform to something whack. Let's be clear. You can be a worse off version than you were before. Then the people around you, now they're in a grieving process of like, wow, what happened? What is that song? It was a 50 Cent song. I think it was Wankster or something like that, where he's like, damn, homie, in high school you was the man, homie. what the happened to you? You know, it's like, yeah, but
so
like,
we also have to consider, where are we in this transformation process? Are we the ones
where are
being
we?
transformed away from?
Yeah, where are you transitioning from? Where are you heading to? That's the sense making process that we've been talking about this whole time. Is that like being intentional with it? This goes without saying, but everybody's their own person. You know, like you got to ask yourself what means the world to you. Well, if your grandmother is a person who means the world to you, am I transition to somebody who my grandmother would celebrate? It's funny. Just to reference one other transition, at least I gave a bit of a nod to it a few minutes ago, but when I said that, like, oh, I can't be with nobody who's not about making pro-social moves in this life, that came about by me learning how much pain there is in the world. Um, that came about me learning about how much my experience as being a Black man matters to me, and not just matters to me. It matters. Period. Why? Because when the police pull me over, they know that me being Black matters. You know, think about the whole adoption industry or whatever. They know being Black matters. Why? Because Black children go for cheaper than white children do. Being Black matters. When I'm learning about my Blackness or like my Black experience, is that like I need to be with someone who can like really give a nod to my Blackness or at least lean into it. You know, so what I'm highlighting here, Hannah and Claire, is that like your own self-discovery as you embark on the journey of eating through the layers of your pie, if you will, or of your cake, actually, you, I think it will naturally occur of what matters to you that will then provoke that transformation of how you spend your time, how you spend your money, with whom you associate yourself with, your values, your morals, your pursuits, whatever. Like, as we were talking about, I think you were the author of this thought, Claire. To the extent that you learn about yourself will pave way for the transformation in your life and is a transformation within itself. Is that self-discovery, that self-exploration.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And I think that just, I mean, calling out these things that have been so abstract in our conversations, to say that your Blackness does matter and it is value, and that surrounding yourself with people who see that value and who hold that value is critical. It is not only, it is how we can transform. It is to the transformation. And in that sense, you and all of us must let go. You cannot hold on to those relationships or hold on to that past self or those past permeable boundaries. We have to hold tight to the boundaries of our transformation, and that will lead us to the transformation of ourselves, but the transformation of the communities that we live in and the societies that we live in and the futures that we seek. And I really believe that strongly. And we have to hold each other's values close.
Because this is, I think, golly, I think that's what Hannah had said from the very jump of this chat, is what we're talking about here is a big deal, right? Because I will posit that we ought to more often share the stories of transformation, just so people know that it's okay
for their transformation to look in different ways. Like people need to know it's okay to not have the same friends as you did in elementary school. people need to know that it's okay, that sometimes transformation calls for a transition. And I distinguish the two because transition is something that's more external and transformation is internal. Transition could be like a geographic transition. Like me, I just moved from Denver to Milwaukee. But did that make a transformation? Maybe, maybe not. And so I think we more often need to share the stories of our transitions as well as our transformations, just to let people know that it is okay. Sadness is okay. The grief that we were talking about is okay, or at least it's all understandable, and we can empathize with it. But once again, we have to be as intentional as possible of the manifestations of our transformation. Because yeah, sometimes we could transform that will manifest in ways of some real dark stuff, drugs, self-harm,
Right. Right.
versus self-loving actions.
Yeah. And it's almost a beautiful place to end our conversation too, because I think that the transformation that you're talking about is self-love.
Yes, it's self-love, not in the egotistical kind of way, but self-love as the Greeks thought of it. I mean, I believe they use the word I might butcher the phrasing, but philatia, understanding that your life of love will only go to the extent to which you have loved yourself. But remember, love isn't just like a bunch of rainbows and soft blankets and gallons of ice cream watching Netflix. You know, it's more than that. Love hurts. Like, so doing the thing that which is like a growing pain, if you will, because you know it's for the betterment of yourself. That's self-love. I think if you are embarking, or if you're facing with a decision where you're trying to like, do I make this move or this move? um, I can transition or transform in these ways. You got to ask yourself, to what extent do I love myself and want the best for myself, not necessarily what feels good.
Thank you, Darrie. I love that.
Darrie, thank you so much for just being your authentic self 100% of the time, whether we're on this podcast, whether we're at an alumni panel, whether we're, walking on the way to the parking garage, you always bring yourself to the table. And it is one of the most admirable things. I think it's very difficult to do that. Just thank you so much for taking us there throughout this conversation. And I felt kind of guilty after I asked some challenging questions, but you handle it with such grace. Thanks for being up for it.
Oh,
Thank
of
you, Darrie.
course. Of course.